All right, in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at types of fractions. Here, I'm not only going to speak about common, improper, or mixed numbers. I'm also going to address decimal fractions. And then in the videos to follow, I'll show you how we calculate and approach each of those separately. So if we first look at our normal fraction, basically a fraction is a number over another number. And if we break that up into terminology, the top number is known as your numerator, and your bottom number is known as your denominator. So it's big English words, but if you think about it this way, if you've woken up after a party and you know there's some pizza slices left, let's say for instance there are the pizza's divided into 8 slices, and upon your investigation you find that only 2 slices have been eaten. I don't know, maybe it was a fish pizza or something, but anyway, nonetheless there are 4 slices left. So therefore there are 4 slices out of 6 left, right? This is then known as a proper fraction. So a proper fraction is like your perfect all out when your numerator is smaller than your denominator. In other words, it is bottom heavy. Those that attend my extra lessons, they'll know when I speak of top heavy and bottom heavy. But those of you that are quick enough to respond, you'll also note that this fraction is not in its simplest form. So a number needs to be in its simplest, a number is in its simplest form when there's no number that can divide into the top and into the bottom. So if you look at 4 and 6, you know that they are both multiples of 2. In other words, 2 can still divide into both of those numbers. So whatever I do at the top, I have to do at the bottom. So divide by 2, that's then left with 2 over 3. If I look at 2 over 3, there's no number besides 1 that can divide into both of those numbers. And we do not divide by 1 because then you'll be given the same answer as you were given in the question. So we leave it at that. So this is a proper fraction in its simplest form. In other words, that's how we want to see it in your calculations. So our next type of fraction is an improper fraction. So apologies. So let's say, for instance, you've got a cake for a party. Let's do another circle one. You've got a cake for a party, and your mom baked too much cake, and instead now of just having a few slices, you got a few ones extra. So let's say your cake was cut into quarters, like it was a small cake or maybe just greedy, and you had an extra 2 slices. Okay, so our next type of fraction is an improper fraction. For those that attend my extra lessons, this is known as your top heavy. So with that being said, this is when your numerator is much larger than your denominator. In other words, it looks something like this. We've got something that is like 7 over 5, 100 over 90, 1000 over 2. When you're top heavy, in other words, when your top number is much larger than your bottom number. Now, the problem with this is, and it's not uncommon to find these, but in most tests will ask you to either convert it to a mixed number or put it into a fraction in its simplest forms. Now, how do we do that? So when we've got an improper fraction, so improper fraction or number, and I want you to change it for me to its simplest form. It sounds like a lot of work, but all I'm actually asking you is change it for me to a mixed number. Now, this is also back to grade 5 work for those that struggle with this. I really do urge you to go back to your old school books. So what we need to do first is the following. So if I have a fraction, for instance, like 17 over 5, I need to ask myself the following. How many times can 5 divide into 17? In other words, how many times can it fit into it without having a remainder? So if you count into 5s, you've got 5, 10, 15. So that's 3 fingers on your hand. In other words, it goes in 3 whole times, so that's your 3 whole number, and then what is left. So when we work out what is left, we need to remember the following. To work out what is left, I take my existing numerator, which is 17, and then I subtract what I counted with on my fingers. So I counted 5, 10, 15. 17 minus 15 gives me 2. So therefore your answer is 3 and 2 over 5. A small error that a lot of learners make with the denominator is they change it. Sometimes they write over 15 or it just gets lost in translation. Remember, your denominator that you started with has to be the same one that you end with. So that's most important with improper fractions. So that's actually quite easy. So in calculations, when you add or subtract fractions, you might find that you end up with an improper fraction. Don't leave it at that step. Remember to change it back. Any fraction needs to be in its simplest form. So our next fraction is, of course, a mixed number. So this is also not new work. So when we work with mixed numbers, we need to remember the following. It consists of a whole number and then a fraction. So you hear this often when you bake cakes or so, you need 2.5 cups of flour or such. So it's not something that's weird or so, it's actually quite common in everyday use. So a common question you can get in a test will be change a mixed number to an improper. Now, a lot of you say, well, we can't, we must always have simplest, but it's just for us to see if you know how to do it. And it's actually quite easy. It's just a reverse gear of what we did now. So if I give you, for instance, 4 and 2 over 10, we do it as follows. So we take our whole number, we times it with the bottom, get an answer, take that answer, and then we add the top. So 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 plus 2 gives me 42. But 42 is not a fraction. That is now your new numerator. So a numerator is a number that goes on top of a fraction. So that being said, it needs to be 42 over something. Remember what I told you in the previous probably a minute or two ago. The denominator you start with is the one you need to end with. So with that being said, if you started with 10, you must end off with 10. So 42 over 10. Now, immediately you'll notice, right, this is a top heavy, so I've done my job. Cool, I'm done. Don't go and make the error of then changing it back to a mixed number, because then you've done the whole marathon for no reason. So leave it at that. We're just trying to see if you know how to do that. So that's most important. So that's how you change a mixed number into an improper fraction. Right. Our next set of fractions are called decimal fractions. So if we look at this, decimals are basically, it also consists of a whole number followed by a comma and then a series of digits afterwards. And this is very common when we work with money, measuring items like if you're running or if you have to travel or you have to measure something with your ruler, you also actually use decimals quite often. And it works as follows. So if I give you the decimal of 0.5, then I give you, and then I give you 0.55 followed by 0.555. Let's first work with these three different ones. Right. If there is only one value after the decimal, then your fraction must be written over 10. And I'll show you now what I mean by this. If there are 2 decimals, you need to have 2 zeros. If there are 3 decimals, you need to have 3 zeros. If you have 4, you need to have 4 zeros. If you have 5, you need to have 5 zeros. So that's how it works. All you do then is now, so what we are actually doing, I'm taking a decimal number and I'm changing it to a fraction. This is also very common in your assessments. So on that note, so I've already done the first bit by working out the denominator. Ask myself how many spaces or spots or digits after my comma, and the first one I had 1, so I need to have 1 0 at the bottom. A number of 1 0 is, for instance, 10. You cannot write 20, 30 or anything. It needs to be a 1 and a 0. So a 10, a 100, a 1,000, and so forth. After you've done that, you literally just go and you copy and paste this value across. Same here and same here. But if you listen now to the previous few minutes, you'll know that this is not complete because these are not fractions in simplest form. So we need to go back and see, right, what number can divide into the top and into the bottom. So I know 5 can fit into both, so 5 goes in itself once, it goes into 10 and twice, so you're left with a half. If you jump from this step to this step and your question is 1 mark, you're fine. If it's 2 marks, I first need to see this step. So it's quite easy. That's how you change a decimal number into a proper fraction. Now, another way we can convert these, if I can give you a whole number in front. Let's say you've got 3,042. And I'll ask you to change that for me to a fraction. This is what you need to ask yourself. You need to ask yourself, number one, how many whole numbers do I have? In other words, how many numbers do I have in front? In this case, I've got 3. That is a whole number. It has nothing to do with your fraction. Now you ask yourself the following. Right, how many spaces after your comma? 1, 2, 3. So your fraction needs to be over 1,000. You need to have 3 zeros. And then all you need to do then is write your existing number on top. So I never start a number with 0. I'll start then with the next digit, which is then 42. Right, if you got this step, you've got half a mark. The next step would be to change it into its simplest form. So 3 stays, your whole number does not change. If you look at what can go to 42 and 1,000, the easiest number would have to be 2. So 42 divided by 2 is 21. And 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. Right, so that's what we've done so far. If you're unsure, play around, divide by 3, because a lot of kids they stop after dividing one time and they don't try it next. If you're not sure, because you cannot use a calculator, do it manually. So 500 divided by 3. 3 goes into 5 and once. 2 is left. It goes into 20 and 6 times. 2 is left. 6 times. So there's a remainder. Sorry, remainder 2. So that will be your final step. Right. And that's how we change a decimal to a mixed number or to a fraction. I can also go reverse gear. I can give you the mixed number. So I can give you the mixed number. So if I give you 4 and 2 over, let's choose a nice one, 2 over 50. Right. And I ask you to change that for me to a decimal. You need to ask yourself the following 3 questions. Number 1, what is your whole number? So in this case, your whole number is 4. So that being said, you start off your decimal by writing 4, comma. Then you need to ask yourself the following. Is your fraction over a 10, 100, or 1,000, and so forth? It can be 10,000, 100,000, it doesn't matter. It's over 50. So there's a bonus step that needs to take place. I need to change this over 100, 1,000, a 10, or any of the sorts. So I can always buy bigger genes. I can't buy smaller genes. So I can't fit a 50 into a 10, but I can fit a 50 into 100. So it'll be much easier to change it than to a fraction over 100. What do you do with 2 over 50 to change it to 100? In other words, what do you do from 50 to get to 100? You times by 2. So what you do at the bottom, you do at the top. 2 times 2 is 4. So now you need to remember, I've not changed the value. I've just converted it to a similar fraction. With that being said, 4 over 100 is the same as 2 over 50. So that's got 2 spots, in other words, 2 zeros. So it means 2 spots. So put down 2 little lines after your comma. Now, 4 is only one number. You cannot write 4 at the front because that would actually be 40 over 100. And 40 and 4 are 2 very different numbers. So first fill in an imaginary 0, if you will, and then your 4. Because remember, this needs to match out as 4 over 100. And that's how we change a mixed number into a fraction. If you didn't have the mixed number, so in other words, if it was just 2 over 50, you'd start off, so I'll write it, if you had 2 over 50, your answer would then be 0, 0,04, because you've got a whole number of 0, right? And that's how we work with fractions.